I spent 30 years building a life of careful savings and modest security, only to watch it vanish in 3 months because I trusted my son. Aaron was always the charming one, quick with a smile, quicker with excuses, and somehow I never saw the darkness growing inside him until it was too late. They say a parent's love is blind, but mine wasn't just blind. It was willfully ignorant, desperate to believe in second chances even when the evidence mounted with each emptied account and broken promise. The morning I discovered what he'd done, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my morning coffee, the same routine I'd followed for decades. The email notification from my bank seemed innocent enough, just a monthly statement. I almost didn't open it. Sometimes I think about that moment, that split second before I clicked, when my world was still intact and retirement still felt secure. The balance stared back at me. 328.17. Just 3 months earlier, it had been 237,156.43. My entire life's savings, the cushion I'd built over decades of working overtime at the hospital, picking up holiday shifts when others went home to their families, skipping vacations, living frugally in my modest ranch house while I put my son through college. My hands trembled so badly I spilled coffee across my lap, but I barely felt the burn. I called the bank immediately, certain there had been some terrible mistake. The customer service representative's voice grew increasingly uncomfortable as she confirmed what I couldn't accept. A series of transfers had emptied my accounts, all authorized with my credentials. All to the same recipient, Aaron Miller, my son. "Mrs. Miller," she said gently, "these transfers were authenticated with your password and the security questions. They came from your home IP address." I ended the call and sat in stunned silence. My house felt suddenly foreign, like I was seeing it through a stranger's eyes. The worn sofa where Aaron had been sleeping, just until he found a place. The gaming console he'd bought as an investment. The expensive shoes lined up by the door. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching his things, piecing together the betrayal. His laptop was still open on the coffee table. I had never invaded his privacy before, but desperate times strip away social niceties. What I found shattered any remaining illusions. Browser tabs opened to online casinos, emails from loan sharks, messages from people with names like Big Dave 420 and Vegas King discussing odds, debts, and payment schedules. A separate email account I'd never seen before, filled with desperate pleas for extensions on loans, promises to pay next week for sure, and increasingly threatening responses. My son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father walked out, the young man I'd put through college with my night shifts and overtime, had stolen everything I had to feed a gambling addiction he'd hidden from me. It was nearly noon when Aaron finally emerged from his bedroom, rumpled and bleary-eyed as he headed for the coffee pot. He didn't notice me sitting quietly at the dining table, his laptop open in front of me. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, pouring himself coffee. "You're home early today." "I called in sick," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Sit down, Aaron." Something in my tone must have penetrated his hangover because he turned, suddenly alert. His eyes darted from my face to his open laptop, and I watched the color drain from his features. "I can explain," he started, but I held up my hand. $237,000, I said quietly. "My retirement, my security, my entire life's work." He set down his coffee cup with a shaking hand. "Mom, I swear I was going to pay it back. I had a system. I just hit a rough patch, but I'm about to turn it around." "Stop lying." I cut him off. "I've read everything. The loans, the threats, the failed systems. It's all gone, isn't it?" His face crumpled. "I'll fix this, I swear. I'm good for it. I've got a lead on a job, and this guy I know has a foolproof betting strategy." I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward. "Get out!" "Mom, please, get out!" I screamed. A lifetime of restraint shattering in an instant. You stole from me. Your own mother. I worked night shifts for 30 years so you could have opportunities. And this is how you repay me? By stealing my future? Aaron flinched like I'd slapped him. Then his expression hardened. Fine. You want me gone? I'm gone. But don't act like you're perfect. You and your guilt trips and your sacrifices. Maybe if you hadn't been so controlling, I wouldn't have needed an escape. The audacity stole my breath. He stormed into his room, emerging minutes later with a hastily packed duffel bag. I stood, immobile as he paused at the door. I'm sorry, he said, not meeting my eyes. I'll pay you back, I swear. Then he was gone, the door slamming behind him. I sank to the floor, my legs no longer able to support me, and wept until there were no tears left. The following days passed in a blur of police reports and bank meetings. The officers were sympathetic, but blunt. Because Aaron had used my credentials and lived in my home, it would be difficult to prove theft rather than consent. The bank representatives spoke in gentle tones about elder financial abuse and family fraud protection that I should have had in place. Everyone was sorry. No one could help. I returned to work because I had no choice. At 62, my retirement, dreams had evaporated. My colleagues noticed the change in me, the dark circles under my eyes, the weight dropping off my already slender frame, the way I flinched when someone touched my shoulder. My friend Diane from radiology finally cornered me in the break room. Linda, what's going on? You look like you're dying inside. The concern in her eyes broke something in me. Over stale hospital coffee, I told her everything. The theft, Aaron's addiction, the shattered future. He's still in town, I finished, staring into my cup. Jenny from physical therapy saw him at Westridge Apartments. Apparently, he's renting a place there. God knows where he got the money. Probably another loan he can't pay back. Diane's expression had shifted from sympathy to calculation. Those apartments aren't cheap, and they require a good credit check. He used a co-signer, I said bitterly, his father's new wife. She always thought the sun shone out of Aaron's ass. Never believed me when I tried to tell her about his problems. Diane took my hand. I might know someone who could help. Not to get your money back, but, well, to make sure Aaron understands the consequences of what he's done. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? My brother-in-law Marcus works for a debt collection agency. Not one of those polite corporate ones. They handle the tough cases, the ones banks and credit cards have written off. They're persistent. I don't understand. Diane lowered her voice. If Aaron has taken out loans from less than reputable sources, those debts will eventually be sold to collection agencies. Marcus could help make sure those agencies know exactly where to find him. I don't want to hurt him, I said automatically, the maternal instinct still firing despite everything. This isn't about hurting him, Diane replied. It's about reality. He stole your life savings, Linda. He's out there living in a nice apartment while you're working double shifts at 62. The collection agencies will find him eventually. This just speeds up the process. Let him face what he's done. I stared at my trembling hands. I'll think about it. But as days stretched into weeks with no word from Aaron, no attempt to make amends, something hardened inside me. I saw him once by chance coming out of an expensive restaurant with friends, laughing. He was wearing a new jacket that probably cost a week of my salary. He didn't see me, standing frozen on the sidewalk, watching him spend what was left of my future. That night, I called Diane. Give me your brother-in-law's number. Marcus turned out to be surprisingly professional. A tall, soft-spoken man with steady eyes and none of the thug-like qualities I'd irrationally feared. We met at a coffee shop far from my neighborhood, and I laid out everything I knew about Aaron's debts. I found names in his emails, I explained, sliding over a list I'd compiled. Big Dave, someone called Shark, Vegas King, a company called Fast Fortune Loans. There are probably more. Marcus glanced over the list and nodded. I know some of these operations. They sell their bad debts to agencies like mine when they can't collect. I can put the word out. Make sure his file gets flagged as collectible rather than write-off. When the debts hit our system, I'll personally notify the collectors exactly where to find him. What will they do to him? I asked, still conflicted. Despite my resolve. Nothing illegal, Marcus assured me. They'll contact him persistently. Visit his home, his workplace. They'll make it clear the debts won't disappear. If he doesn't cooperate, they might pursue legal action, wage garnishment. But mostly, they'll make sure he can't hide from what he's done. I pushed an envelope across the table. His current address, work information, phone number, social media accounts, everything you need to find him. Marcus didn't touch it immediately. Are you sure about this, Mrs. Miller? He's still your son. I thought about my retirement fund, reduced to 3 digits. About the arthritis beginning to twist my fingers after 30 years of nursing work. Work I would now have to continue, indefinitely. About the casual way Aaron had blamed me for his theft. The son I raised wouldn't have stolen my life savings, I said quietly. I don't know who this person is anymore, but he needs to learn actions have consequences. Marcus nodded once and took the envelope. I'll be in touch. 2 weeks later, my phone rang as I was getting ready for another early shift. It was Marcus. It's happening today, he said without preamble. 3 different collection agencies have acquired portions of his debt, and they're all sending representatives this morning. They'll hit his apartment at 9 a.m., and if he's not there, they'll go to his workplace. Do you want details afterward? My heart pounded painfully. No. Yes, I don't know. There was a pause. There's something else you should know. These debts, they're much larger than what he took from you. Your son is in deep, Mrs. Miller. Over $500,000 deep. The room seemed to tilt. That's not possible. He only stole $237,000 from me. And he's been borrowing from these other sources for nearly 2 years, according to our records. The gambling problem didn't start with your money. It just escalated. The interest rates on these loans are predatory. They've ballooned. I sank onto the edge of my bed. What will happen to him? Best case? He agrees to a payment plan and sticks to it. Worst case? If he doesn't cooperate or can't pay, some of these lenders might pursue criminal charges for fraud. He could be looking at jail time. Jail? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller. I thought you understood what you were setting in motion. Had I? I'd wanted Aaron to face consequences, to understand what he'd done to me. But jail? My little boy in a prison cell? The image made me physically ill. Can you stop it? I whispered. It's already happening, Marcus replied gently. The collectors have his information. But listen, he dug this hole himself, long before. You came to me. All you've done is make sure he can't keep hiding from it. After we hung up, I sat motionless, memories washing over me. Aaron at 5, proudly showing me a drawing. Aaron at 12, gangly and bright, winning the science fair. Aaron at 18, in his graduation cap, promising to make me proud. Where had that boy gone? When had he become a stranger who could steal my future without remorse? My phone lit, up with a text message jolting me from my thoughts. Unknown number. Mom, they're here. All of them. What did you do? As I stared at the words, another message followed. Please. They're saying if I don't pay, they'll take legal action. They know everything, where I work, where I live. They're saying I could go to jail. Mom, please help me. The familiar pull of maternal protection warred with a newer, colder feeling. Justice. For 30 years, I'd sacrificed everything for him. And he'd taken everything from me without a second thought. My fingers hovered over the screen. What kind of mother allows her child to face debt collectors alone? But then again, what kind of son steals his mother's entire life savings? I set the phone down without responding and headed to the shower. I had a shift to work, bills to pay, a future to rebuild from ashes. But as the water washed over me, I found myself weeping. For the son I'd lost long before I discovered the theft, for the mother who couldn't save him from himself, and for the broken bond that might never heal. By the time I stepped out of the shower, 6 more messages had arrived, increasingly desperate. I read each one with a strange detachment, as if they were coming from a stranger. In many ways, they were. The last message simply read, "I understand now." "I'm sorry. Too little, too late," I thought as I dressed for work. But a small part of me, the part that would always be a mother, hoped it wasn't. I thought ignoring Aaron's desperate texts would bring me satisfaction, some sense of justice served. Instead, I moved through my hospital shift like a sleepwalker, checking vitals and dispensing medications with mechanical precision while my mind replayed those messages. "Mom, they're here. All of them. What did you do?" Nurse Jacobs touched my shoulder as I stood staring blankly at a patient chart. "Linda, are you all right?" "Fine," I muttered, though the tremor in my hands betrayed me. "Just tired." My phone vibrated again in my pocket, the 7th time in 2 hours. I didn't need to look to know it was Aaron. Each ignored call should have felt like righteous vindication. Instead, a cold knot formed in my stomach, growing heavier as the day wore on. By late afternoon, I couldn't bear it anymore. I slipped into the staff bathroom and finally checked my messages. 5 missed calls, 3 voicemails. The first was almost incoherent, Aaron's voice shaking. "Mom, these people are serious. They're saying I owe over $500,000 with interest. They have papers. They know about the money I took from you, too. How do they know everything? Please call me back." The second, an hour later, was quieter, defeated. "They're giving me 48 hours to come up with a payment plan, or they're taking legal action. They've already contacted Dad. His wife is freaking out. I can't believe you did this." The last message, left just 30 minutes ago, was different. No pleas, no accusations. Just exhaustion. "I know I deserve this. I know what I did to you was unforgivable. But if you could just call me back, I need to talk to you. Just once." I leaned against the cold tile wall, phone clutched in my hand. Part of me wanted to delete the messages, block his number, continue the complete severance I'd initiated. But another part, the part that had sat by his hospital bed when he had pneumonia at 7, who had taught him to ride a bike and tie his shoes and navigate heartbreak, that part couldn't let go. I called Diane during my break. "They found him," I said when she answered. "Marcus's people, they're giving him 48 hours. "Good," she replied firmly. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm angry and heartbroken and relieved somehow that it's out in the open, that he can't keep pretending everything's fine." "That's normal," Diane assured me. "You're not a monster for wanting accountability." "His father knows now, too," I said. After 15 years of minimal contact, Aaron suddenly has to explain to him why debt collectors are calling, Diane snorted. "About time Richard faced some consequences, too. Maybe if he hadn't walked out, things would be different." "Maybe," I said, unconvinced. Richard's abandonment had wounded Aaron deeply, but plenty of children with absent fathers don't grow up to steal their mother's life savings. After my shift ended, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, staring at Aaron's last text message. "I understand now, I'm sorry." 5 simple words that couldn't possibly encompass the magnitude of what he'd done. Sorry wouldn't restore my retirement fund. Sorry wouldn't erase the betrayal. Sorry wouldn't fix the years of deception that had preceded the theft. Yet I found myself typing a response. "I can't help you with the collectors. That money is gone. But I'll listen. Once, if you want to talk." His reply came instantly. Can I come over tomorrow after work? Around 7? I hesitated, then typed, yes. The moment I hit send, anxiety flooded through me. What was I doing? Inviting the person who had violated my trust in the most fundamental way back into my home? I'd spent 2 weeks hardening my heart, convincing myself I was done with him. Now, with one moment of weakness, I was opening the door to more manipulation, more lies. I called Marcus. Mrs. Miller, he answered, his voice carefully professional. I was going to call you tomorrow with an update. How bad is it? I asked. For Aaron, how bad is it really? Marcus was silent for a moment. It's serious. The total with penalties and interest is just over $537,000. 3 different collection agencies are involved, plus there's a loan that hasn't been sold to collections yet. The lender is not the kind you want to be indebted to. You mean it's illegal? I said flatly. Let's just say they don't use conventional banking regulations, Marcus replied. Look, Mrs. Miller, your son got himself into this mess long before you contacted me. The gambling debt started almost 2 years ago, small at first, then escalating. What he took from you was just the latest and largest amount. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Could he really go to jail? For the illegal loans? No. Those lenders don't exactly call the police. For the legitimate debts, including what he took from you? Possibly, if the creditors pursue fraud charges. But most likely they'll seek civil judgments, wage garnishment, asset seizure. He doesn't have assets, I interrupted. He spent it all. Then they'll take whatever he earns for years to come, Marcus said simply. He'll be financially crippled for a decade, maybe longer. I closed my eyes, imagining Aaron, my bright, charismatic son with all his wasted potential, spending his 30s and 40s working only to watch most of his paychecks disappear into the hands of collectors. A lifetime of consequences for 3 years of terrible choices. He's coming to see me tomorrow, I said. Mrs. Miller? Marcus's voice took on a warning tone. If you're considering helping him financially, I strongly advise against it. People with gambling addictions. I don't have anything left to give him, I cut in. He made sure of that. I need to see him. To understand. Understanding is fine, Marcus said. Just remember what he did to you. Addicts can be incredibly manipulative, especially when they're desperate. I thanked him and hung up, sitting in the darkening parking lot as hospital staff changed shifts around me. Eventually, I drove home to my empty house where I moved from, room to room turning on lights against the growing darkness, trying to dispel the shadows that seemed to gather in corners. That night, I dreamed of Aaron as a child, his small hand in mine as we crossed a street. But when I looked down, his hand had slipped away, and I watched helplessly as he ran into oncoming traffic. I woke gasping, sheets twisted around me, the dream panic lingering even as consciousness returned. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in months. I couldn't face another shift of distracted care, not with Aaron's impending visit looming over me. Instead, I cleaned obsessively, as if I could somehow scrub away the betrayal that had occurred in these rooms. By afternoon, every surface gleamed, but the house still felt tainted. At 6:58 p.m., headlights swept across my living room window. I watched through the blinds as Aaron sat in his car for nearly 5 minutes before finally approaching the door. He looked terrible, unshaven, hair, unwashed, dark circles under his eyes. The expensive jacket was gone, replaced by a worn hoodie I recognized from his college days. I opened the door before he could knock. "Mom," he said softly, and the single word carried a weight of emotion I wasn't prepared for. "Come in," I replied, stepping aside. He entered hesitantly, like a stranger rather than someone who had lived here just weeks before. His eyes darted around the living room, taking in the changes I'd made. His gaming console gone, his books and magazines cleared away, all traces of his presence methodically erased. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch. He perched on the edge, hands clasped between his knees. Up close, he looked even worse. Gaunt, pale, a slight tremor in his fingers that I recognized from my years in healthcare as either anxiety or withdrawal, maybe both. "You've lost weight," I observed. A humorless laugh escaped him. "Haven't been eating much. Or sleeping." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "They took my car this morning, repossessed it right from the apartment parking lot." I said nothing. My landlord called too. Apparently some concerned citizens informed him about my financial situation. I have 30 days to vacate. Still, I remained silent. "And my job," he continued, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "My boss called me in, said they'd received multiple calls about me being a financial risk. They're putting me on probation." "What did you expect?" I finally asked. "That you could steal over $500,000 and face no consequences?" His head snapped up. "I didn't steal $500,000. No." I cut him off. "You stole $237,000 from me. The rest you borrowed fraudulently with no intention of repaying. Does the distinction really matter, Aaron?" He seemed to deflate before my eyes. "No, you're right." He stared at his hands. "I came to tell you I'm getting help. Real help this time. I found a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. I went yesterday." "Good," I said, surprised by the genuine relief I felt. "That's good. I can't undo what I did," he continued. "I know that. I can't give you back your retirement fund, not anytime soon, but I'm going to try. I've worked out payment plans with 2 of the collection agencies, 20% of whatever I earn for the foreseeable future." I raised an eyebrow. "Only 20%? "From each agency," he clarified, "plus whatever arrangement I make with the third one. And the other lender." "The loan shark," I said bluntly. Aaron winced. "Yeah." "How did it get so bad?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for weeks finally spoken aloud. "How did my son, who I thought I raised to know right from wrong, end up here?" He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "It started after Emma left me." Emma. His college girlfriend, the one I'd thought he might marry. They'd broken up nearly 3 years ago. "She found out I'd cheated on her," he continued. Shame, evident in every line of his body. "Multiple times. She confronted me, threw her engagement ring in my face, and walked out. I was devastated isn't the right word. Terrified. I'd ruined the best thing in my life and I couldn't face it." My chest tightened. I hadn't known about the engagement or the cheating or any of it. When had my son become such a stranger to me? Buddy took me to a casino to cheer me up," Aaron continued. "I won $3,000 that night. It felt incredible, like I was in control of something, like I mattered. I went back the next weekend, lost everything I'd won plus my rent money. And instead of stopping, you chased the loss, I said, recognizing the pattern from articles I'd read on gambling addiction since discovering the theft." He nodded. "I borrowed money to cover my rent, told myself I'd win it back plus extra to repay the loan. Lost that too. Borrowed more. It just spiraled. I'd win occasionally, just enough to keep me believing I could fix everything with one big score. The loans got bigger, the interest rates got worse, and I kept digging deeper. Until you decided to steal from me," I finished. Aaron flinched. "I didn't see it as stealing at first. I told myself I'd borrow from you just once, win big, then return it before you even noticed. When I lost that money too, I think something broke inside me. I kept taking more, promising myself each time it was the last that this bet would turn everything around. You transferred the money in 17 separate transactions," I said, my voice hardening. Over 3 months. That wasn't one desperate decision, Aaron. That was a sustained campaign of theft against your own mother. Tears spilled down his cheeks. I know. And there's no excuse. Not the gambling addiction, not the breakup, nothing. What I did to you was unforgivable. Then why are you here? I asked. If you believe it's unforgivable, what do you want from me? Nothing, he said, wiping his face with his sleeve. I don't expect forgiveness or help. He took a deep breath. I needed you to know that I understand what I did, that I'm facing it, that I'm trying to get better, not for you or for the collectors, but because I don't want to be this person anymore. I studied his face, searching for signs of the manipulation Marcus had warned me about, but all I saw was exhaustion and shame. Where are you going to live? I asked. When you have to leave your apartment, he shrugged. Dad offered. His garage temporarily, but his wife isn't happy about it. I'll figure something out. Maybe a room in a shared house, something I can afford on what's left of my paycheck after the garnishments. I nodded, a strange numbness settling over me. This broken man before me was still my son, but the relationship we'd had was gone, shattered beyond simple repair. I have conditions, I said suddenly. Aaron looked up, confusion crossing his features. Conditions? If you want any relationship with me going forward, I clarified. Any contact at all. I have conditions. Hope flickered in his eyes, quickly tempered by wariness. What conditions? I leaned forward, my voice firm. First, you continue with Gamblers Anonymous. Not just a few meetings. You work the program. Seriously, get a sponsor, the whole thing. He nodded immediately. I will. Second, you get therapy for the underlying issues. The ones that led to cheating on Emma, to gambling, to thinking it was acceptable to steal from your mother. A longer pause, then another nod. Okay. Third, you show me proof of your payment plans with all the creditors, and you notify me immediately if you miss any payments for any reason. I can do that, he agreed. And fourth, I said, my voice catching slightly, you accept that trust is earned, not given. I won't be lending you money, co-signing loans, or giving you access to my home, unsupervised for a very long time, maybe never again. The last condition seemed to hit him hardest. He closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the new reality of our relationship. I understand, he said finally. And I accept your conditions. I exhaled slowly, feeling the first tenuous threads of something. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the precursor to it, forming between us. I don't know if we can fix this, Aaron, I said honestly. Some damage can't be undone, but I'm willing to see if there's a path forward. He nodded, tears flowing freely now. That's more than I deserve. As he rose to leave, looking simultaneously relieved and devastated, I felt a curious lightness, not happiness, but the lifting of a different kind of burden. For weeks, I'd carried not just the pain of betrayal, but the weight of vengeance, the cold satisfaction of orchestrating Aaron's confrontation with his creditors. That bitter pleasure had occupied the same space in my heart that love for my son had once filled. Now, neither emotion seemed to fit properly, leaving a vacant, tender place that ached with possibility and uncertainty. At the door, Aaron turned. Jack. Do you want to know the worst part? He asked quietly. The thing that keeps me awake at night? I waited, unsure if I wanted to hear it. It's not the debt or the collectors or even the shame, he said. It's knowing that when you needed your retirement fund, years from now when you're too old or sick to work, it won't be there because of me. That I stole not just your money, but your future security, your peace of mind. That's what I can never make right. As he walked to his car in the gathering dusk, I realized he was right. Some things can't be made right. Some betrayals leave permanent scars. The question remaining wasn't whether Aaron could restore what he'd taken. He couldn't. but whether two damaged people could build something new from the rubble of what was lost. I closed the door and leaned against it, listening to his car start and drive away. The house felt different now, not healed, but no longer haunted by unspoken rage. The first step on a very long road had been taken. My phone buzzed with a text. "Marcus, just checking in. How are you holding up?" I stared at the message, considering my response. The orchestrated confrontation had worked, perhaps too well. Aaron was facing his collectors, his addiction, his self-deception. And I was facing the hardest question of all: how to be both just and merciful to the person who had hurt me most deeply. "We talked," I finally replied. "It's complicated. It always is with family," came his response. "Remember, protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary." As I set the phone down, I knew he was right. Whatever came next between Aaron and me, I would need to maintain boundaries I'd never before enforced with my only child. The mother who would have done anything to protect him had been replaced by a woman who had finally learned to protect herself. It wasn't the future I'd planned, but it was the one I had now. And somehow, I would find a way forward, one careful step at a time. 3 weeks after Aaron's visit, I received a letter from a law firm representing Fast Cash Enterprises, the third collection agency that had acquired portions of his debt. The envelope, cream-colored and heavyweight, sat unopened on my kitchen table for 2 days before I finally worked up the courage to read it. Inside was a formal notice naming me as a person of interest in their investigation of Aaron Miller's financial activities. They requested an interview to clarify the nature of certain transactions between Aaron and myself. The implication was clear. They suspected I might have been complicit in hiding assets. My hands trembled as I reread the carefully worded letter. The collection agency wasn't just pursuing Aaron, they were coming after me too. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. I'd set this machine in motion, and now it was turning in my direction. I called Marcus immediately. "They can't seriously think." "I helped him," I said when he answered. "I'm the victim here." "It's a standard intimidation tactic," Marcus replied, his tone reassuring. "They're fishing, hoping you might have access to funds they can claim. Don't worry, I know people at Fast Cash. I'll make some calls, explain the situation." "Can they force me to come in for questioning?" I asked, picturing myself in some stark interrogation room, treated like a criminal. Technically, no. But ignoring them completely could make things more complicated. "Let me handle it." After we hung up, I sat clutching the letter, a wave of anxiety tightening my chest. This nightmare should have been Aaron's alone to bear. Instead, it was spreading like an infection, contaminating every aspect of my life. My phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. "Got my first paycheck at the new job. Sending you proof of payments to creditors as promised." The new job, a step down from his previous position, working night shifts at a shipping warehouse, had been a condition of his probation with his former employer. He'd been sending me weekly updates as we'd agreed, confirmation of his GA meetings, therapy appointments, and now, proof of payments. I texted back, "I received a letter from Fast Cash today. They want to interview me." His response came immediately. "What? I'm so sorry. I'll call them right now. This isn't right." Before I could reply, my phone rang. "Aaron." "Mom, this is completely unacceptable," he said without preamble. "They have no right to drag you into this. I've made it clear to every collector that I'm the only responsible party." "Apparently they don't believe you," I said, surprised by his vehemence. "I'll fix this," he promised. "I have a meeting with their representative tomorrow anyway. I'll make it absolutely clear that you had no knowledge or involvement." His protectiveness caught me off guard. After everything, here he was, trying to shield me from the consequences of his actions. It was a small thing, perhaps meaningless, in the grand scheme of his debt, but it was the first time since the theft that he'd thought about the impact of his choices on me. "Thank you," I said quietly. After we hung up, I found myself staring at my faded wallpaper, tracing the pattern, with my eyes as I'd done countless times during sleepless nights since discovering the theft. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. Aaron, at 16, using his first paycheck from a summer job to buy paint for this very kitchen, insisting on helping me refresh the walls I'd been complaining about for years. We'd spent a weekend painting together, laughing as we spattered each other with pale yellow droplets, his teenage surliness temporarily replaced by the sweet boy he'd once been. Where had that boy gone? Was he truly gone forever, or just buried beneath layers of addiction and poor choices? The following evening, Aaron called again. "I met with the fast cash representative," he said. "They've agreed to leave you alone. I explained everything, that you had no knowledge, that you're actually the victim in all this. I think they understood." Relief washed over me. "Thank you. It's the least I could do," he replied, his voice heavy with meaning. An awkward silence stretched between us. "How are the GA meetings going?" I finally asked. "Good. Hard, but good. I have a sponsor now, guy named Mike, 30 years clean. He doesn't let me get away with anything." "That sounds helpful." "It is. The therapy, too. Turns out I have a lot to unpack." He paused. "Dad's coming to a family support meeting next week." The mention of Richard, my ex-husband, sent a familiar pang through me. "That's good. I'm glad he's involved." "He asked if you might come too." "Not the same day as him," Aaron added quickly. "They encourage family members to attend different sessions, to understand the addiction better." I hesitated. Attending would mean accepting a level of involvement in Aaron's recovery that I wasn't sure I was ready for. It would mean acknowledging our relationship was worth rebuilding. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "That's all I'm asking." He replied, the hope in his voice carefully restrained. After we hung up, I found myself browsing through old photo albums, something I'd avoided since discovering the theft. Page after page of Aaron growing up, birthday parties, school plays, camping trips. The images blurred as tears filled my eyes. Loving him had always been easy. Trusting him again seemed impossible, but perhaps understanding was a place to start. The family support meeting was held in a church basement, folding chairs arranged in a circle under fluorescent lights. I arrived early, sitting near the exit in case it became too overwhelming. Gradually, the room filled with people, mostly women, a few men, all bearing the same weary expression, a mixture of love and betrayal that I recognized from my own mirror. The facilitator, a kind-faced woman named Helen, started by explaining the purpose of the meeting. "You're here because someone you love is battling gambling addiction. You didn't cause it. You can't control it. You can't cure it. But you can learn to understand it. And in doing so, make healthier choices for yourself." As the meeting progressed, others shared their stories. Mothers, fathers, spouses, siblings of gambling addicts. Tales of second chances given and betrayed, of homes lost and savings depleted, of hope repeatedly crushed beneath the weight of broken promises. When my turn came, I found myself speaking more openly than I had with anyone except Diane. "My son stole my retirement savings to feed his gambling addiction," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Over $237,000, taken in small amounts over 3 months so I wouldn't notice." When I confronted him, he blamed me for his choices, said if I hadn't been so controlling, he wouldn't have needed an escape. Nods of recognition around the circle. They'd heard similar excuses. The hardest part is reconciling the son I thought I knew with the person who could do this to me. I keep asking myself where I went wrong, what I missed, how I could have raised someone capable of such betrayal. Helen leaned forward. "That's the cruel nature of addiction. It transforms people we love into strangers. But it's important to remember that your son's addiction isn't a reflection of your parenting." "Maybe not," I conceded. But my response to it says something about me as a person, and I did something I'm not proud of. The words tumbled out before I could reconsider. How I'd contacted Marcus, how I'd orchestrated the confrontation with debt collectors, how I'd wanted Aaron to suffer as I had suffered. I was so focused on justice that I didn't consider mercy, I finished, guilt washing over me afresh. What kind of mother does that make me? An older woman across the circle spoke up. A human one. My daughter stole my wedding ring to pawn for gambling money. It was my mother's ring, irreplaceable. When I found out, I called the police myself and pressed charges. She spent 3 months in jail. Did it help? I asked. The jail time? No. But the wake-up call? Eventually. She twisted a ring on her finger. Not the original, I guessed, but a replacement. She's been clean 4 years now. Works as a counselor. For other addicts. Sometimes rock bottom is where they need to land before they can start climbing out. After the meeting, Helen approached me with a collection of pamphlets and a gentle smile. First meetings are always the hardest, she said. How are you feeling? Confused, I admitted. Part of me wants to forgive Aaron, to help him rebuild his life. Another part can't stop seeing him as the person who betrayed me in the worst possible way. Both perspectives can be true simultaneously, Helen replied. Recovery isn't just for the addict, it's for the family too. And just like addiction didn't happen overnight, healing won't either. I tucked the pamphlets into my purse. Will it ever stop hurting this much? The pain changes, she said thoughtfully. It doesn't disappear, but it transforms from something sharp and overwhelming into something you can carry without being crushed by it. At least, that's been my experience. I learned later that Helen's husband, a recovering gambling addict, had lost their home and savings twice before finally committing to sobriety. They'd been rebuilding their life together for over a decade. That night, I texted Aaron. I went to the family support meeting. Today, his response came quickly. Thank you. It means more than you know. For the first time since discovering the theft, I slept without dreaming of betrayal. The tentative peace was shattered 3 days later when I returned home from work to find my front door ajar, interior lights blazing. Heart pounding, I retreated to my car and called the police, watching my house from a distance as I waited. The responding officers found no one inside, but my home had been thoroughly searched. Drawers emptied, mattress overturned, even air. Vents unscrewed from the walls. Strangely, nothing obvious had been taken. My television remained, as did my laptop and the small amount of jewelry I owned. Any idea what they might have been looking for? The officer asked as she took my statement. A cold certainty settled in my stomach. Money. They thought I had cash, hidden in the house. And do you? No, I replied, thinking of my devastated bank accounts. There's nothing to find. After the police left, promising increased patrols in the area, I called Marcus. It's starting, I said when he answered. The other lender Aaron mentioned. The loan shark. They came to my house. Marcus was silent for a moment. Are you safe? For now. But they'll be back when they realize I don't have what they're looking for. Pack a bag, he said firmly. You can't stay there tonight. Do you have somewhere to go? Friends? Family? I thought of Diane, who would welcome me without question. And Richard, who would probably help out of lingering guilt, but involving them would only widen the circle of danger. I'll get a hotel, I said. Use cash only, Marcus advised. No credit cards, nothing traceable. And call Aaron. He needs to know what's happened. I was already throwing essentials into a suitcase. What can he do? He's the reason they came after me in the first place. True, but he might have information about who these people are, how they operate. Knowledge is power, Mrs. Miller. And right now, you need all the power you can get. I checked into a modest motel on the edge of town, paying cash as Marcus had suggested. Only after I'd double-locked the door and wedged a chair beneath the handle. Did I call Aaron? Someone broke into my house, I said when he answered. Looking for money, I assume? Your other lender. Oh, God, he breathed, horror evident in his voice. Mom, where are you? Are you safe? I'm somewhere secure, I said vaguely. Who are these people, Aaron? What did you get involved with? He was quiet for so long, I thought. We'd lost connection. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. His name is Vincent Caruso. They call him the Calculator. He runs an underground gambling ring and lending operation. I started borrowing from him about a year ago when the legitimate sources dried up. How much do you owe him? Another lengthy pause. Just over $175,000 with interest. My blood ran cold. And you told him about me? About my savings? No, never. Aaron's denial was vehement. But I might have mentioned living with my mother when I first started dealing with him, before I moved out. I never thought he'd come after you. Well, he has, I said flatly. And now I'm hiding in a motel room afraid to go home. This is what your addiction has done, Aaron. It's not just destroying your life anymore. It's destroying mine, too. I'm going to fix this, he said, desperation edging his voice. I promise. How? You can barely make your payments to the legitimate collectors. What are you going to offer a loan shark? I don't know yet, but I will figure it out. The determination in his voice was unlike anything I'd heard from him recently. For now, stay where you are. Don't go home. Don't contact anyone who might inadvertently lead them to you. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the sagging motel bed, exhaustion washing over me. 6 weeks ago, my biggest concern had been when I could afford to retire. Now I was essentially a fugitive, hiding from criminals who thought I might be concealing my son's gambling money. The injustice of it all crashed over me in waves. I had worked honest, grueling shifts my entire adult life. I had raised my son, alone, sacrificed my own comforts for his future, played by every rule. And this was my reward, cowering in a cheap motel while loan sharks ransacked my home. My phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. I'm meeting with Vincent tomorrow. I'll convince him to leave you out of this. Please stay safe until then. I stared at the message, a new fear gripping me. What exactly did meeting with Vincent entail? I pictured Aaron facing some movie-style gangster, making promises he couldn't keep, putting himself in even greater danger. Don't do anything stupid, I texted back. These aren't people you can negotiate with. Trust me, came his reply. For once, I know what I'm doing. Trust. The very concept seemed laughable after everything that had happened. Yet, as I curled up on the lumpy mattress, wrapping myself in the thin motel blanket, I realized I was trusting Aaron, with my safety, with my future. Not because he deserved it, but because I had no other choice. Sleep eluded me as scenarios played through my mind. Aaron hurt or worse, the loan sharks finding my hiding place, the unraveling of what little security I had left. Somewhere around dawn, my exhaustion finally overtook my fear, and I drifted into uneasy dreams. I awoke to pounding on my door. Disoriented, heart racing, I fumbled for my phone to check the time. 2:17 p.m. I'd slept far longer than intended. The pounding continued. Mrs. Miller? Linda Miller? Are you in there? I froze, panic rising in my throat. How had they found me? Mrs. Miller, it's Detective Ramirez with the county police. We need to speak with you about your son, Aaron Miller. Police? About Aaron? New fear replaced the old as I approached the door cautiously. How do I know you're really police? I called. I can slide my badge under the door, came the reply. And you can call dispatch to verify my identity. After confirming the detective was legitimate, I opened the door to find a grave-faced woman in plain clothes, her badge hanging from a chain around her neck. What's happened? I asked, already knowing it was bad. Your son is in the hospital, she said gently. He's been badly beaten. We have reason to believe it's connected to gambling debts. The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Is he... Will? He's stable, Detective Ramirez assured me. But he's asking for you, and we need to ask you some questions about a man named Vincent Caruso. As I gathered my few belongings with shaking hands, Detective Ramirez explained that Aaron had been found in the parking lot of an abandoned warehouse, beaten severely but still conscious. He'd named Vincent Caruso as his attacker before passing out. We've been building a case against Caruso for months, she continued. Your son's statement could be crucial evidence. In the squad car, sirens clearing our path to the hospital, I stared out at the passing city. The normal people living their normal lives, untouched by the chaos that had engulfed mine. Had orchestrating Aaron's confrontation with his creditors led directly to this moment? Was his broken body another consequence I'd set in motion? The detective seemed to read my thoughts. This isn't your fault, Mrs. Miller. Caruso is a predator who targets vulnerable people. Your son's choices led him into Caruso's path, but you didn't put him in that parking lot. No, I agreed quietly. But I wanted him to face consequences. I wanted him to suffer for what he'd done to me. And now he's suffering, Detective Ramirez finished. But not because of you. Because of Caruso. Because of his own actions. Sometimes justice and mercy look different than we expect. As we pulled up to the hospital entrance, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. The cycle of betrayal and vengeance had brought us here. My son in a hospital bed, me flanked by police protection. Whatever came next, it was clear that neither of us would emerge unchanged. You said he's asking for me, I said to the detective as we hurried through the hospital corridors. What did he want to tell me? Detective Ramirez's expression softened slightly. He said, and I quote, "Tell her I fixed it. Tell her she's safe now." A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying suddenly lifted. Aaron had tried to protect me, even at great cost to himself. It wasn't redemption. Nothing could fully redeem what he'd done. But it was something. A first step on a very long road. As we approached his hospital room, guarded by a uniformed officer, I wondered what version of my son I would find inside. The manipulative addict who had stolen my future? The broken man seeking redemption? Or someone new entirely, forged in the crucible of consequences we had both created? With a silent prayer for strength, I stepped through the doorway to find out. I almost didn't recognize Aaron when I entered the hospital room. His face was so swollen that one eye had disappeared into puffy flesh, purple and yellow bruising spreading across his cheekbone. His right arm was in a cast, his torso wrapped in bandages visible at the edges of his hospital gown. A monitor beeped steadily beside him, tracking vitals that the nurse had assured me were stable despite his appearance. "Mom," he croaked, his split lip making even that single syllable painful. I moved to his bedside, torn between maternal instinct, urging me to comfort him, and the lingering anger that had defined our relationship for months. Detective Ramirez remained by the door, giving us the illusion of privacy while maintaining her protective watch. "What happened?" I asked, settling for resting my hand near his on the bed, not quite touching. Aaron swallowed with difficulty. "I went to make a deal with Vincent. Thought I could convince him to leave you alone." A bitter laugh escaped him, immediately followed by a grimace of pain. "Turns out my negotiation skills need work." "You could have been killed," I said, the reality of how close I'd come to losing him hitting me with unexpected force. "I had to try. They were going to keep coming after you otherwise." His uninjured hand inched toward mine. "I recorded everything. The whole meeting. Handed it over to the police when they found me." Detective Ramirez stepped forward. "Your son was wearing a wire. The recording captures Caruso not only admitting to previous crimes, but also ordering the attack on your son. It's incredibly valuable evidence. I stared at Aaron in disbelief. You deliberately provoked a loan shark while secretly recording him? What were you thinking? That I needed to fix what I'd broken, he replied simply. Even if it meant taking a beating. A knock at the door interrupted us. Detective Ramirez opened it to reveal another plainclothes officer, who gestured for her to step into the hallway. Their hushed conversation was barely audible, but I caught phrases like, executed, the warrant, and found the books. When Ramirez returned, her expression was grimly satisfied. We've just arrested Vincent Caruso, she announced. The recording your son provided gave us enough for a search warrant. We found evidence of his entire operation. Names, amounts, threats. He'll be going away for a very long time. Relief washed over me. So it's over? We're safe? Caruso is in custody, and we're rounding up his associates, she confirmed. There will be court appearances eventually. Both of you may need to testify, but the immediate danger has passed. After providing additional details and arranging for continued protection until all of Caruso's crew were apprehended, Detective Ramirez left us alone with the uniformed officer stationed outside. Aaron's gaze was fixed on the ceiling. I know this doesn't make up for what I did to you. Nothing could. But I needed to do something right for once. The sincerity in his battered face made my throat tighten. You could have told me what you were planning. You would have tried to stop me. He was right, of course. I would never have allowed him to put himself in danger, no matter how angry I was. The maternal instinct to protect never truly disappears, even when the child has become the source of your deepest pain. The doctors say I'll be here at least a week, Aaron continued. 3 broken ribs, fractured arm, internal bruising. Could have been worse. Vincent usually makes examples of people who cross him. I shuddered at the thought. And the other creditors? The collection agencies? Still there. Still my problem. A ghost of a smile touched his swollen lips. But at least one debt is settled. As visiting hours ended and I prepared to leave, Aaron caught my hand. Where will you go? Your house isn't secure yet. The question caught me off guard. In the chaos of his hospitalization, I hadn't thought about my own accommodations. I'll find another motel, I said. Somewhere different. Aaron pressed a key into my palm. My apartment. The rent's paid through the end of the month. It's not much, but it's safe. No one will look for you there now. The offer surprised me. Are you sure? He nodded slightly, wincing at the movement. It's the least I can do. Aaron's apartment was exactly what I'd expected. A small 1-bedroom with minimal furnishings, hastily cleaned but still bearing the signs of a young single man's life. A pile of mail sat unopened on the counter, mostly envelopes with the ominous look of bills and collection notices. A small table held a laptop and scattered papers, payment plans, I realized upon closer inspection, carefully noted with due dates and confirmation numbers. Despite everything, he had been trying to honor our agreement. The bedroom was sparse, just a mattress on a basic frame, a dresser with a crack running down one side, and a nightstand holding a well-worn copy of the Gambler's Anonymous Big Book, pages dog-eared and highlighted. I slept fitfully on the unfamiliar bed, surrounded by the lingering scent of my son's cologne and the almost tangible weight of his struggles. In the morning, I found myself examining the apartment more thoroughly, looking for insights into the person Aaron had become when I wasn't watching. The refrigerator held little besides condiments and a half-empty carton of milk. The cabinet contained a few packages of ramen and a box of protein bars, the diet of someone stretching a limited budget. The bathroom revealed more. Prescription bottles for anxiety and depression, dated just weeks ago. He hadn't mentioned being on medication. By the time I returned to the hospital later that day, I had a clearer picture of my son's current reality. And It was far from the carefree existence I'd imagined when I'd seen him laughing outside that restaurant months ago. Aaron was sitting up when I arrived, looking marginally better despite the deepening colors of his bruises. "You stayed at the apartment," he observed. I nodded, settling into the visitor's chair. "I found your medications. You didn't tell me you were being treated for depression." He looked away. "Part of the recovery program. My therapist thinks I've been self-medicating with gambling for years, using the high to avoid dealing with everything else." "Everything else?" Aaron sighed, then winced at the pain it caused his ribs. Dad leaving. Always feeling like I wasn't good enough. The pressure to succeed, to justify all your sacrifices. He met my eyes directly. "I'm not blaming you. It's my responsibility how I chose to handle those feelings. But the gambling, it wasn't just about money. It was an escape." The admission hung between us, raw and uncomfortable. Had I contributed to his problems without realizing it? Had my sacrifices, meant to provide opportunities, instead become a burden of expectation he couldn't bear? "I never meant to pressure you," I said finally. "I know. And I never meant to hurt you." He adjusted himself carefully against the pillows. "But we did hurt each other, didn't we? Long before I took your money." The truth of his words settled heavily in my chest. Our relationship had never been as simple or as healthy as I'd convinced myself it was. The theft had merely exposed fractures that had been forming for years. "Where do we go from here?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know I'm going to pay you back, every cent. It might take years, but I'll do it." "If you do, it should be because it's right, not because you're trying to buy back my affection," I said carefully. "I understand the difference now." He gestured toward his bedside table, where a worn notebook lay. "Could you hand me that?" I passed him the notebook, which he opened to a page filled with neat columns of numbers. "I've been working on this since our talk. It's a repayment plan. After the minimum payments to the collection agencies, I can afford to give you $470 a month. It's not much, but over 30 years that wouldn't even cover what you took," I pointed out. "I know, but it's a start. And as I get better jobs, as the other debts get paid down, I'll increase the amount." His determination was palpable. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom, but I need to try to make this right, in whatever small way I can." I studied the meticulous calculations, recognizing the effort they represented. This wasn't a quick promise made. To appease me, it was a carefully considered commitment, one that would shape his financial life for decades to come. "I'll accept the payments," I said finally. "Not because I think they'll restore my retirement, but because you need to be accountable." The relief in his eyes was evident. "Thank you." The conversation shifted to his recovery, the upcoming police investigation, the logistics of eventually returning to work with his injuries. Normal concerns, almost mundane compared to the dramatic events that had preceded them. Yet there was comfort in the ordinary, in planning for a future that no longer seemed defined solely by betrayal and retribution. As visiting hours ended, I stood to leave, pausing at the doorway. "I'll come back tomorrow. Is there anything you need from the apartment?" "Just my phone charger. And maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe we could play some cards, like we used to when I was sick as a kid? Nothing with betting," he added quickly. "Just to pass the time." The request transported me back to winters when young Aaron would be home with colds or flu, and I'd take rare time off work to care for him. We'd play endless games of gin rummy and crazy eights, building memories I'd treasured. "I think I can manage that," I said, surprised by the warmth that spread through me at the thought. The next week settled into a rhythm. Mornings at Aaron's apartment, afternoons at the hospital playing cards or watching TV together. Evenings spent reading the materials from the family support group. Detective Ramirez visited twice with updates on the case against Vincent Caruso, each time assuring us that our safety was no longer at risk. On the day Aaron was released, I drove him back to his apartment, helping him navigate the stairs with his injured ribs and casted arm. "You can have the bed back," I offered as we entered. "I'll take the couch until I can return to my house." Aaron shook his head. "I've been laying down for a week. The couch is fine." He settled onto it carefully, adjusting pillows to support his healing body. "Besides, it's your apartment now too, at least temporarily." The casual inclusion struck me, the acknowledgement that we were, for better or worse, sharing space again. Not as mother and dependent son, but as two adults navigating a complicated relationship. "I spoke with my landlord yesterday," he continued. "I can't afford this place anymore, not with the payment plans. I'll be moving out at the end of the month." "Where will you go?" I asked, concerned about his ability to manage a loan while still recovering. "I've arranged to rent a room from Mike, my GA sponsor. It's cheaper, and he understands the situation. Having someone keeping an eye on me is probably smart anyway." The maturity in his planning surprised me. "That sounds sensible. What about you? When will your house be ready?" According to the police, my home was officially cleared for return, but the idea of going back to the house that had been violated left me uneasy. I'm not sure I want to live there anymore. Even knowing Caruso is locked up, the thought of sleeping there. Aaron's face fell. "Another thing I've taken from you. Your sense of safety in your own home." "I was thinking of selling anyway," I said, surprising myself with the realization as I spoke it. "It's too big for just me, and after everything that's happened, maybe a fresh start would be good." "Where would you go?" I hadn't gotten that far in my thinking. "Somewhere smaller, more affordable. Something that would stretch what's left of my savings." Aaron was quiet for a moment, then spoke hesitantly. "I have an idea. It's presumptuous, and you have every right to say no, but what if we found a 2-bedroom place? Together?" I stared at him, taken aback. "You want us to live together? After everything?" "Not forever," he clarified quickly. "Just for a year or two. My room rental with Mike is month to month. If we pooled resources, you could get a nicer place in a safer area than either of us could afford alone, and I could give you the money. I would have spent on rent as additional repayment. Aaron, I don't know. You'd have your own space," he continued, words tumbling out as if he'd rehearsed this pitch. "I'd respect your privacy completely, and it would be a chance to rebuild. To have daily accountability, to show you, not just tell you that I'm committed to recovery." The earnestness in his battered face made it hard to dismiss the idea outright. Still, alarm bells rang in my mind. Living together again would be complicated. The trust issues, alone, would be addressed openly, he finished. We'd have clear boundaries, financial transparency, maybe even check-ins with Helen from the support group. He leaned forward, despite the pain it clearly caused. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask for another chance, but I'm asking anyway." I studied him, the son who had betrayed me in the deepest possible way, now bruised and broken from an attempt to protect me. The addict working a recovery program, the thief creating repayment plans, the man acknowledging the damage he'd caused while trying to forge a path forward. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "That's all I can promise for now." The relief in his eyes told me he'd expected an outright rejection. That's more than enough. That night, lying in Aaron's bed staring at the ceiling, I weighed the proposal from every angle. Living with Aaron again would mean constant vigilance, at least initially. It would mean facing daily reminders of betrayal while trying to build something new. It would mean watching for signs of relapse, monitoring his behavior for dishonesty, constantly questioning my own judgment. But it would also mean having a chance to truly know the person my son was becoming through recovery. It would mean witnessing his efforts firsthand, rather than receiving filtered reports. It would mean the possibility, just the possibility, of healing a relationship I had thought beyond repair. I thought of Helen's words at the support group. Recovery isn't just for the addict, it's for the family too. Perhaps this was part of my recovery journey, learning to navigate a relationship transformed by addiction and betrayal, neither naively trusting nor permanently shutting the door. In the morning, I found Aaron already awake, awkwardly making coffee one-handed. "I've been thinking about your proposal," I said, accepting the mug he offered. His expression remained carefully neutral. "And? If we did this, and that's still a big if, I would need certain non-negotiable conditions." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Name them." "Complete financial transparency, separate bank accounts, but full disclosure of statements. I would manage the rent payments and utilities directly." He nodded. "Absolutely." "You would continue GA meetings, therapy, and medication as prescribed. No exceptions, no excuses. I already plan to. You would agree to a weekly meeting with me to discuss any issues, concerns, or progress. Open communication, even when it's uncomfortable. Done." I took a deep breath. "And you would accept that this arrangement doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't mean I've forgiven you. It just means I'm willing to see if there's a path forward." Aaron's expression sobered. "I understand. Rebuilding trust takes time, if it happens at all. I'm not expecting miracles, Mom. Just a chance." The sincerity in his voice resonated with something that had been awakening in me over the past weeks. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first stirrings of compassion. For both of us. "Then let's look at apartments," I said, cautiously. "One step at a time." His smile was tentative but genuine. One step at a time. 2 days later, as we toured a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, separate bathrooms, a small balcony, reasonable rent, I found myself imagining a possible future. Not the retirement I had planned, certainly. That dream had died the day I opened my bank statement. But something else. Something I hadn't considered before. A relationship with my adult son built on hard-earned honesty rather than comfortable illusions. As the rental agent stepped away to take a call, Aaron turned to me, his bruised face more contemplative than I'd ever seen it. "I know this isn't the life you envisioned," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry for that. Sorrier than I can express. But I promise you this. Whatever life we build from here, it will be based on truth. No more hiding, no more pretending. Not from you, and not from myself." I looked at my son. Really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. Not the child I'd raised, not the thief who had betrayed me, but the complex, flawed human being standing before me, trying to find his way back from terrible choices. "Truth is a good foundation," I replied. "Maybe the only one that matters." As we left the apartment, stepping into the uncertain future that awaited us, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The orchestration of Aaron's confrontation with his creditors, my act of vengeance, had set in motion a chain of events neither of us could have predicted. It had nearly destroyed us both. Yet somehow, through pain and consequence and brutal honesty, it had also created an opening for something I had thought impossible. Genuine healing. The road ahead would be long and difficult. Trust, once shattered, does not mend easily. Addiction, once established, remains a constant threat. And $237,000 does not reappear overnight. But as we walked side by side, both wounded but still standing, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps this new beginning, forged in the crucible of betrayal and consequence, might ultimately lead somewhere worthwhile. Not to the destination I had once planned, but to territory I had never thought to explore. A relationship between mother and son built on the bedrock of difficult truth rather than comfortable deception. It wasn't the future I had saved for all those years. But as Aaron held the car door open for me, his injured body moving carefully but with purpose, I realized it was the future we had now. And for today at least, that would have to be enough. Moving day arrived with unexpected anxiety. Despite the careful consideration that had gone into our decision, packing my remaining belongings filled me with doubt. Was I making another mistake? Setting myself up for more heartbreak? The rational part of me knew that co-signing a lease with my recovering gambling addict son, who had stolen my life savings, was objectively unwise. Yet here I was, labeling boxes and dismantling the life I'd built in my old home. Diane had been blunt when I told her my plans. "Are you out of your mind, Linda? He stole everything from you and now you're moving in with him?" "Not exactly with him," I'd corrected. "It's a 2-bedroom apartment, separate spaces." "Separate spaces under the same roof you're helping pay for," she'd countered. "What happens when he relapses? When you come home to find he's pawned your gi?" "Television?" Her concerns echoed my own darker thoughts. But something Helen had said in the support group kept returning to me. Recovery is a family journey. You can maintain boundaries while still being present. The apartment we'd chosen was on the second floor of a well-maintained complex across town. Nothing luxurious, but clean and secure, with a small balcony overlooking a shared garden. Most importantly, it represented neutral territory, a fresh start for both of us, unburdened by the history of my violated home or Aaron's debt-laden apartment. Aaron arrived with the rental truck, his arm still in a cast but his facial bruising faded to yellowish shadows. He'd been staying with Mike, his GA sponsor, since being discharged from the hospital, giving me time to sell my house and sort through decades of accumulated possessions. "The movers are right behind me," he said, surveying the stacked boxes in my driveway. "Are you ready for this?" The question carried weight beyond the logistics of moving. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, neither of us acknowledging the leap of faith we were taking. We worked in tandem throughout the day, directing movers and arranging furniture. By evening, the apartment had taken on the basic shape of habitability. Beds assembled, kitchen unpacked, shower curtains hung. We collapsed onto the couch, surrounded by half-empty boxes and the peculiar limbo of a space caught between transience and permanence. "I've been thinking about how to make this work," Aaron said, breaking the comfortable silence. "The living arrangement, I mean." "I thought we already discussed the ground rules," I replied, wary of renegotiation. "We did. But I want to add something from my side." He shifted to face me directly. "I want you to have access to my phone and computer. Anytime, no questions asked." The offer caught me off guard. "That seems extreme." "It's what I need right now," he said firmly. "Secrecy fed my addiction. Privacy became a weapon I used against you. This isn't forever, but for now, while we're rebuilding trust, I don't want any dark corners where temptation can hide." I studied his face, searching for signs of manipulation or martyrdom, but found only steady resolve. "Are you sure? That's a significant surrender of privacy." "I'm sure," he nodded. "My sponsor suggested it actually. Said it would help keep me accountable and help you feel secure." This gesture, this voluntary dismantling of the secrecy that had facilitated his addiction, touched me in unexpected ways. Not because I wanted to monitor his every digital movement, but because it represented a genuine commitment to transparency. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully. "But maybe we start with scheduled check-ins rather than unlimited access. Your recovery has to be about more than just me watching you." Relief flickered across his features. "I can work with that." Our new routine established itself gradually over the following weeks. Aaron found a job at a warehouse that accommodated his still-healing arm, working evening shifts that meant our paths crossed primarily in the mornings. I returned to my regular schedule at the hospital, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of work that had sustained me through other difficult periods of my life. Each Sunday evening, we sat at our small kitchen table for what Aaron had dubbed the accountability meeting, reviewing bank statements, upcoming bills, and his attendance at GA meetings and therapy sessions. The formality felt strange at first, like conducting a performance review with my own son, but it provided a structured space for difficult conversations that might otherwise have been avoided. "I've been pre-approved for a secured credit card," Aaron announced during one such meeting, sliding the letter across the table. $300 limit, completely self-funded from my checking account. I scanned the document, noting the high interest rate but fair terms otherwise. "This is part of rebuilding your credit?" He nodded. "My financial counselor at GA recommended it. Start small, use it only for gas, pay it off immediately." A hesitant smile crossed his face. "Baby steps back to financial adulthood." That phrase, financial adulthood, struck me as particularly apt. In many ways, Aaron was starting over completely, learning lessons about money management and responsibility that should have solidified years ago. Our living arrangement wasn't without challenges. Aaron's struggle with gambling manifested in unpredictable ways. Nights when I'd hear him pacing at 3 a.m., battling urges he later described as physical, like an itch under my skin. Days when he'd come home from GA meetings emotionally raw, having confronted another layer of shame or guilt. Moments when tension would build over something trivial, dishes left in the sink, a misplaced bill, because we were both hyper-aware of the fragility of our new equilibrium. But there were unexpected gifts, too. One evening, I came home to find Aaron sitting on the balcony, sketchbook in hand, intent on capturing the sunset. I'd forgotten his childhood talent for drawing, abandoned somewhere in adolescence when sports and social status became more important. "I didn't know you still drew," I said, settling into the chair beside him. "I didn't for years," he replied, not looking up from his work. "My therapist suggested finding activities that gave me fulfillment before gambling took over." The sketch was surprisingly good, confident lines capturing the architectural elements of neighboring buildings silhouetted against the fading light. "My art teacher in high school wanted me to apply to design programs," he continued, adding, shading to a roofline. "Remember?" I did remember, vaguely. Had I dismissed the idea, pushing him toward practical fields instead? Had I been so focused on financial security that I'd steered him away from genuine passion? The possibility sent an uncomfortable ripple through me. "You could still take classes," I suggested. "The community college has evening programs." He considered. This head tilted. "Maybe, when things stabilize a bit more." The moment highlighted something I was slowly realizing. I didn't actually know many of Aaron's interests or aspirations. Our relationship had been so defined by his financial dependence and my sacrificial provider role that we'd missed developing the multidimensional connection that carries parent-child relationships into healthy adulthood. 3 months into our new living arrangement, Aaron received a call from Detective Ramirez. Vincent Caruso had accepted a plea deal, avoiding trial but guaranteeing a 15-year sentence. We wouldn't need to testify after all. "She said they found records of at least 30 victims," Aaron reported, hanging up the phone. "Some owing much more than me. Some who lost their homes, their businesses." He sat heavily on the couch. "I could have been one of them, if things had gone differently." "But they didn't," I said, surprising myself with the lack of recrimination in my voice. He glanced up, equally surprised. "No, they didn't. Thanks to you." "Me? I didn't do anything except put the collectors on your trail." "Exactly," he said quietly. "You forced me to face reality when I was still trying to outrun it. If you hadn't..." He trailed off, the unspoken possibilities hanging between us. Later that evening, as I prepared for bed, I found myself reflecting on his words. Had my act of vengeance, orchestrating his confrontation with the debt collectors, actually been the catalyst for his recovery? The thought was uncomfortable, challenging my own narrative about my motivations. I hadn't set the collectors on him to help him. I'd done it to make him suffer as I was suffering. Yet the consequence, however unintended, had potentially saved him from a much darker fate. The line between justice and mercy, I was learning, was rarely as clear as I'd once believed. The following weekend, I came home from an early shift to find Aaron speaking with a middle-aged woman I didn't recognize. They sat at our kitchen table, heads bent over paperwork, their conversation low and earnest. "Mom," Aaron said, looking up. "This is Janet Walsh. She's the victim advocate from the prosecutor's office." Janet stood, extending a hand. "Mrs. Miller, thank you for meeting with me." "I didn't realize we had a meeting scheduled," I said, shaking her hand while giving Aaron a questioning look. "It was last minute," he explained. "The prosecutor's office is organizing a restitution program for Caruso's victims. Janet wanted to discuss our options." Our options. The casual inclusion startled me. Janet gestured to the paperwork spread across the table. "The assets seized from Caruso's operation are substantial. The court will divide them among confirmed victims, but the process is complex and could take years." "I don't understand," I said, settling into the third chair. "The debt to Caruso wasn't mine." "Actually, Mrs. Miller, you qualify as a secondary victim," Janet explained. "Your home was invaded, your safety threatened. But more significantly, the money your son borrowed from Caruso can be traced directly back to the theft from your accounts." Aaron met my gaze steadily. "I've provided all the bank records showing the transfers from your account to mine, and then from mine to Caruso. They can establish a direct line from his criminal enterprise to your losses." I stared at him, processing the implications. "You did this without telling me?" "I wanted to have all the information first," he said. "Before getting your hopes up." Janet slid a document toward me. "Based on our preliminary calculations, you could recover between 40% and 60% of the original amount, depending on how the asset liquidation proceeds." The number swam before my eyes. Not the full $237,000, but potentially over $100,000, enough to significantly rebuild my depleted retirement fund. "There's a hearing next month," Janet continued. "You'll both need to testify about the financial trail and impacts." After she left, Aaron and I sat in weighted silence, the possibility of partial restitution altering the landscape between us. Once again, "Why didn't you tell me you were pursuing this?" I finally asked. He fidgeted with a pen, clicking it absently. "Honestly? I was afraid you'd say no." "Why would I refuse money that's rightfully mine?" "Because accepting restitution through the court means officially declaring yourself a victim," he said quietly. "In public record." "I thought you might be reluctant." The insight caught me off guard. He was right. There was something uncomfortable about formally claiming victimhood, especially when the perpetrator was my own son. It meant acknowledging the depth of the betrayal in a public forum. Yet it also meant the possibility of meaningful financial recovery. "I'll do it," I said firmly, "not just for the money but because it's the truth. I am a victim in this situation. Pretending otherwise doesn't help either of us." Aaron nodded, relief evident in his expression. "I'll do whatever you need to make the process easier." The restitution hearing arrived on a raw November day, the courthouse steps slick with freezing rain. Aaron and I entered together, joining Janet in a wood-paneled courtroom already filled with other victims, ordinary people whose lives had been upended by Vincent Caruso's predatory operations. When my name was called, I approached the witness stand with steady determination. Under the prosecutor's gentle questioning, I described discovering the theft, learning about Aaron's gambling debts, and the subsequent invasion of my home. I spoke without emotion, presenting facts rather than seeking sympathy. "And what has been the financial impact of these events, Mrs. Miller?" the prosecutor asked. I met her gaze directly. I lost my entire retirement savings, $237,856.43 accumulated over 30 years of work as a nurse. At age 62, I've had to completely restructure my life, continuing to work full-time with no clear path to retirement. And the defendant's role in this loss? Approximately $175,000 of my stolen money went directly to Vincent Caruso's operation through my son. When Aaron took the stand shortly after, his testimony was unflinching in its self-indictment. I systematically transferred money from my mother's accounts without her knowledge or consent, he stated, voice steady despite the damning admission. I then used a significant portion of those funds to pay gambling debts to Vincent Caruso and to place additional bets through his operation. The judge, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair, asked the question no one else had directly posed. And why should the court consider restitution to your mother through seized assets, given that you were the primary agent of theft? Aaron didn't hesitate. Your Honor, I am responsible for stealing from my mother, and I have separate legal and moral obligations to repay her. But Vincent Caruso knowingly accepted and solicited funds that were obtained fraudulently. His operation was designed to exploit addiction, to create and deepen financial desperation. The money that passed through my hands into his was never truly mine to give. His articulation of the complex moral and legal territory surprised me. Somewhere in the midst of recovery, my son had developed a clarity I hadn't fully recognized. The judge rendered her decision that afternoon, granting me victim status and preliminary approval for restitution from seized assets. The final amount wouldn't be determined until all assets were liquidated, but Janet estimated the process would be complete within 6 months. Outside the courthouse, standing beneath the shelter of a concrete overhang as rain continued to fall, Aaron turned to me. 1 down, 2 to go, he said. 2 what? 2 more major creditors, he clarified. We've handled Caruso. Now we just need to resolve the collection agencies and my personal debt to you. The statement was delivered with such matter-of-fact determination that I found myself smiling despite the gravity of our situation. What? He asked, noting my expression. Just thinking about how different you are now, I replied. From 6 months ago? He considered this, hands tucked into his coat pockets against the chill. I don't know if I'm different or just awake. For years, I was sleepwalking through my life, running from reality, hiding from consequences. Now I'm finally facing things as they are, not as I wish they were. The insight struck me as profound, applicable not just to his addiction, but to the patterns that had defined our relationship for decades. How much of our dysfunctional dynamic had been built on things we couldn't face? My need to be the perfect sacrificial mother, his inability to live up to impossible expectations, both of us avoiding the harder conversations. We should celebrate, I said suddenly. He raised an eyebrow. Celebrate what? That I'm only partially responsible for destroying your retirement? No. That we've taken a concrete step forward, that something we lost might actually be recovered. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Okay, what did you have in mind? That evening, we sat in a small bistro a few blocks from our apartment, sharing a modest meal that nonetheless felt ceremonial in its significance. Not a celebration of victory. We were still deep in the trenches of recovering from the damage. Done, but an acknowledgement of movement in the right direction. I have something for you, Aaron said as we finished our coffee. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. It's not much, but it's a start. Inside, I found a check for $2,120, 6 months' worth of the $470 monthly payments he'd promised. How did you manage this? I asked, knowing his warehouse salary was modest and his existing debt payments substantial. I've been doing graphic design work on the side. Logos, simple websites, things I can do in the evenings after my shift. A flash of the old Aaron, proud, eager for approval, crossed his face. Turns out those art classes might have been practical after all. The check represented more than money. It represented follow-through, commitment, creative problem-solving, qualities I'd feared were permanently lost to addiction. "Thank you," I said simply, tucking the check away. As we walked home through streets glistening with rain, Aaron kept pace beside me, our shoulders occasionally brushing. Not the son I'd raised, not the thief who had betrayed me, but someone new emerging from the crucible of consequence, someone I was just beginning to know. The apartment lights glowed welcomingly as we approached, no longer just a pragmatic arrangement, but the beginning of something I hadn't anticipated: genuine rebuilding. Winter settled over the city, bringing with it shorter days and a reflective quietness that seemed to permeate our apartment. 6 months had passed since Aaron and I had begun our cautious cohabitation, a milestone neither of us acknowledged openly, but that hung in the air like a silent achievement. 6 months of weekly accountability meetings, of rebuilding routines, of navigating the delicate balance between vigilance and trust. "You should consider the retirement planning seminar," Diane suggested during our lunch break at the hospital. "The one HR keeps emailing about." I stirred my soup absently. "What's the point? Planning for a retirement that's been pushed back indefinitely?" "The point," she said firmly, "is that you're still going to retire someday. Maybe not at 65 like you planned, but eventually. You need a strategy." The reality of my situation remained stark. Even with the pending restitution, from Caruso's seized assets and Aaron's modest monthly payments, the bulk of my savings was gone. At 62, I was essentially starting over financially at an age when most of my peers were finalizing their retirement details. "I'll think about it," I said, knowing Diane was right, even as I resisted confronting the full scope of my altered future. That evening, I found Aaron at the kitchen table surrounded by unfamiliar paperwork, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What's all this?" I asked, setting down my bags. He looked up, momentarily disoriented as if I'd interrupted a deep thought. "Oh, I'm applying for a certification program, graphic design and web development. It's mostly online, with some weekend workshops." I examined one of the brochures. The program looked legitimate, affiliated with a respected technical college, focused on practical skills, reasonable tuition. "This is a big step," I observed. "Mike thinks it's time," he said, referring to his GA sponsor. 9 months sober from gambling, steady warehouse job, consistent with therapy. He says I need to start thinking longer term. The warehouse position had always been intended as temporary, stable but basic employment while Aaron rebuilt his life. The idea of him pursuing career advancement stirred conflicting emotions. Pride at his progress, certainly, but also wariness. Ambition had often preceded pressure, which had preceded gambling as an escape. "Can you manage the coursework on top of everything else?" I asked. "The job, GA meetings, therapy, the debt payments?" "I've mapped it out," he said, showing me a meticulously organized schedule. "The program takes 18 months part-time. I can keep the warehouse job, maybe scale back to 4 days once I start getting freelance design clients." His planning impressed me, pragmatic, detailed, accounting for both financial realities and recovery requirements. A far cry from the impulsive decisions that had characterized his past. "What about the tuition?" I asked, noting the figure on the application form. "I've been saving," he replied. "And there's a payment plan." He hesitated before continuing. "Also, Dad offered to help Richard. My ex-husband had remained on the periphery of our situation, attending separate family support meetings and occasionally checking in with Aaron, but largely keeping his distance from me." "That's generous of him," I said carefully. Aaron studied my expression. "Is that okay? I know things between you two." "It's fine," I interrupted. "Richard should contribute to your future. He's your father." A shadow crossed Aaron's face. "Sometimes I wonder if I would have turned out differently if he'd stayed." If I would have made better choices. The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. Despite months of cohabitation and cautious reconnection, we rarely ventured into emotionally charged territory. Our conversations remained largely practical: bills, schedules, recovery progress, avoiding the deeper wounds that had shaped our relationship. "We can't know that," I said gently. "And it doesn't change where we are now." He nodded, returning to his paperwork. But the moment lingered, a brief crack in the careful facade we'd constructed, revealing the emotional undercurrents we still hadn't fully addressed. The following week brought an unexpected development. Janet Walsh, the victim advocate, called to inform us that Vincent Caruso's assets had been liquidated more quickly than anticipated, accelerating the restitution process. "The court has approved your claim," she explained. "You'll receive 126,423.89 hours within 30 days. I gripped the phone tightly, stunned by the concrete figure after months of theoretical estimates. Not the full amount, but more than half, enough to significantly alter my financial outlook. "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick with emotion I hadn't anticipated. "There's one more thing," Janet continued. "Caruso has requested a meeting with victims before his formal sentencing. It's completely voluntary, but some victims find it helpful for closure." "A meeting? Like a victim impact statement?" "More like restorative justice," she explained. "An opportunity to speak directly to the person who harmed you, to express the impact of their actions in a controlled, facilitated environment." The concept was familiar from my reading on addiction recovery, confronting harm done, acknowledging pain caused. But the thought of sitting across from Vincent Caruso, the man who had profited from Aaron's addiction and indirectly from my stolen savings, sent a chill through me. "I'll think about it," I said. That evening, I mentioned the call to Aaron over dinner. His fork paused midway to his mouth. "Caruso wants to meet with victims?" I nodded. "Janet said it's voluntary, part of his plea agreement, I think." Aaron set down his fork, his appetite apparently gone. "Are you considering it?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Part of me wants nothing to do with him. Another part wonders if I might find some closure." "I'd go with you," he offered immediately. "If you decided to do it." The offer touched me. Janet said victim offender meetings are usually one-on-one, with facilitators present. "Then I'll wait outside," he said firmly. "You shouldn't have to face him alone." The conviction in his voice reflected a protectiveness I was still getting used to, this new dynamic where Aaron sometimes seemed more concerned about my well-being than his own. It was a reversal of our decades-long pattern, unsettling but not unwelcome. As the restitution payment date approached, I found myself increasingly preoccupied with the question of the victim offender meeting. I raised it during my next session with Dr. Levine, the therapist I'd begun seeing at Helen's suggestion from the family support group. "What do you hope to get from such a meeting?" she asked, her tone neutral. I considered the question. Understanding, maybe, how someone can knowingly destroy lives for profit, whether he feels genuine remorse or just regret at being caught. And if you don't get satisfying answers? Then at least I tried, I said. At least I didn't avoid the opportunity to confront someone who contributed to the damage done to my life. Dr. Levine nodded thoughtfully. Just as you didn't avoid confronting Aaron, even when it would have been easier to simply cut ties, the parallel hadn't occurred to me. That was different. Aaron is my son. Of course, she agreed. But there's a pattern worth noting. When faced with betrayal, you seem to prefer confrontation to avoidance. Direct engagement rather than passive. Acceptance. Her observation resonated uncomfortably. Was that what had driven me to orchestrate Aaron's confrontation with the debt collectors? Not just a desire for justice or vengeance, but a fundamental need to actively engage with betrayal rather than simply absorb it. I left the session with more questions than answers, but with a growing certainty about the victim-offender meeting. I would go. I would look Vincent Caruso in the eye and tell him exactly what his predatory business had cost me. When I informed Aaron of my decision, he immediately requested time off work to accompany me to the prison where Caruso was being held. "You don't need to do that," I protested. "I can handle this myself." "I know you can," he said, "but I want to be there, not just for you, but for me too. He's part of my story as well." The prison visit was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early February. Aaron and I drove together through light snow, the landscape bleached of color, the sky a flat gray that matched my mood. He would wait in the visitor reception area while I attended the meeting in a private conference room, accompanied by Janet Walsh and a prison counselor trained in restorative justice. "Remember, you can leave any time," Janet reminded me as we walked through security checkpoints. "You're in control of this encounter." Vincent Caruso was not what I had expected. Neither the sleek, sophisticated criminal nor the brutal thug I had imagined. He was simply a middle-aged man in a prison jumpsuit, his complexion sallow, his demeanor subdued. Without his freedom, his money, his power, he seemed smaller somehow, diminished to his essential humanity. He nodded as I entered, his expression carefully neutral. The facilitator established ground rules: respectful communication, no interrupting, the option to pause or end the meeting at any time, before inviting me to speak first. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, but faced with the actual moment, those prepared remarks seemed inadequate. Instead, I found myself speaking plainly, directly. "My name is Linda Miller. You never met me, but your business destroyed my retirement savings. My son borrowed money from you, money he had stolen from me, to feed a gambling addiction that your operation encouraged and exploited. When he couldn't pay, your men broke into my home, forced me into hiding, and eventually put my son in the hospital." Caruso's gaze remained steady, his hands clasped on the table before him. "I worked for 30 years as a nurse," I continued. "Night shifts, holidays, weekends, building security for my future one paycheck at a time. Your business took that future from me. At 62, I'm starting over financially because of choices you made." I paused, surprised by my own composure. "I don't expect you to care about me specifically. I was never even a name to you, just collateral damage in your pursuit of profit. But I want you to understand that your business model created ripples of destruction far beyond your immediate victims. Families torn apart, trust destroyed, futures derailed." When I finished, Caruso was silent for a moment, his eyes now fixed on his hands. "I appreciate you coming today, Mrs. Miller," he said finally, his voice quieter than I had anticipated. "And you're right. I didn't know your name. I didn't think about mothers losing retirement funds or families being broken. I told myself I was just providing a service that people wanted." He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. That was a lie I told myself, of course. The truth is, I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew my clients were desperate, addicted. I knew they were stealing, ruining their lives, sometimes ending them. And I kept going because the money was good and the power was better. His candor was unexpected, lacking the justifications or minimizations I had braced for. "I can't undo what my operation did to you or your son," he continued. "The restitution money is something, but it can't restore what was taken. All I can say is that I recognize the harm I caused, and I am genuinely sorry for my part in it." Skepticism must have shown on my face because he added, "I know words are cheap, especially from someone in my position. But for whatever it's worth, facing victims like you, hearing directly how my choices impacted real people, that's the hardest punishment I've received. Harder than the prison time." As the meeting concluded, I felt a curious emptiness, neither the catharsis nor the righteous indignation I had half expected. Just a quiet acknowledgement that Vincent Caruso was, in the end, simply a man who had made terrible, destructive choices for his own gain. Not so different from Aaron in some ways, just operating on a larger scale with fewer moral constraints. Aaron was waiting anxiously when I emerged, rising immediately from his chair as he saw me. "How did it go?" he asked, scanning my face for clues. "It was clarifying," I said, finding it difficult to articulate the complex emotions the meeting had stirred. He didn't deny anything. No excuses, no justifications. Aaron absorbed this silently as we walked to the car. Once inside, protected from the biting cold, he turned to me. "Was it worth it? Coming here?" I considered the question, watching snowflakes begin to accumulate on the windshield. "I think so. Not because anything has changed practically, but because it feels like completion, the closing of a chapter." On the drive home, Aaron was unusually quiet, his expression pensive. Only as we neared our apartment did he finally speak. "I've been thinking about what you described. Caruso taking responsibility without excuses. That's what I need to do more fully." He kept his eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel. "I've been focused on practical amends, the payments, the accountability meetings, following the recovery program. But I haven't really addressed the emotional damage I caused you." The admission hung in the air between us, a door opening to territory we had carefully circumnavigated for months. "What would that look like?" I asked. "Addressing the emotional damage?" "I don't know exactly," he admitted. "But I think it starts with really listening, not to respond or defend or problem solve, but just to understand how deeply my actions hurt you." That evening, after a quiet dinner, we sat in the living room with mugs of tea, the television off, the apartment wrapped in a stillness that felt both comforting and expectant. "I'm ready to listen," Aaron said simply. "If you're ready to talk." And so, for the first time since discovering the theft, I spoke without filters or restraint about the devastation his betrayal had caused. Not just financially, but emotionally. The sleepless nights questioning every interaction we'd ever had. The humiliation of explaining to colleagues why retirement was no longer on the horizon. The profound loneliness of realizing the person I'd trusted most had violated that trust so completely. Aaron listened without interruption, without defensiveness, tears streaming silently down his face as the full impact of his actions was finally laid bare. When I finished, emotionally drained but somehow lighter, he spoke with a rawness I had never heard from him before. "I don't have the right to ask for forgiveness," he said, "but I want you to know that I see you, your pain, your strength, your incredible resilience, and I am so deeply sorry for the harm I've caused. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was acknowledgement, recognition, the beginning of a healing that went beyond practical arrangements and financial restitution to touch the wounded heart of our relationship." The restitution check arrived 3 days later, $123.89, exactly as promised. I deposited it immediately, the transaction routine despite its significance. With Aaron's consent. I used a small portion to enroll in the retirement planning seminar Diane had recommended, a concrete step toward reclaiming the future that had been derailed. The financial advisor assigned to my case was refreshingly straightforward. "This amount, combined with your pension and Social Security, could support a modest retirement in about 5 years," she explained, reviewing my updated financial situation. "Not the timeline you originally planned, but better than many people in their 60s are facing. 5 more years of nursing, of aching feet and rotating shifts at an age when my body protested more each day. Not ideal, but definite, concrete, a horizon I could work toward rather than the nebulous someday that had haunted me since the theft." That night, I added a new column to the budget spreadsheet Aaron and I maintained, retirement fund, with a starting balance that would have been unimaginable just weeks before. Not the full amount stolen, but a foundation to build upon. A tangible step toward reclaiming what had been taken. As winter softened into early spring, our apartment began to reflect the gradual transformation of our relationship. Aaron's desk in the living room now held textbooks and design software for his certification program. My bedroom bookshelf displayed brochures for retirement communities in warmer climates, dreams cautiously re-emerging. The refrigerator door held a calendar marked with GA meetings, therapy appointments, and, most recently, an exhibition at a local gallery where Aaron had submitted work. These weren't just belongings or schedules, they were physical manifestations of a future being painfully, methodically reconstructed from the wreckage of betrayal, a future neither of us could have envisioned a year ago, when debt collectors converged on Aaron's apartment and I sat alone in my violated home, consumed by thoughts of vengeance. "We should celebrate," Aaron suggested one evening, echoing words I had spoken months earlier outside the courthouse. "The restitution, your retirement plan, my first term of classes. Small victories but real ones." I considered his proposition, this marking of milestones that once would have seemed insufficient but now represented genuine progress. "Yes," I agreed. "We should." Our celebration was modest. Dinner at a local restaurant nicer than our usual. Budget allowed. A toast with sparkling cider in deference to Aaron's recovery. But the significance lay not in the event itself, but in its acknowledgement that even incomplete healing was worth honoring. "To small victories," Aaron said, raising his glass. "And to the road ahead," I added, completing the toast. The road ahead, still long, still challenging, still unmarked by the certainty I had once taken for granted. But a road we were now traveling with clear eyes, hard-won wisdom, and a cautious hope that had emerged from the ashes of devastation. Not the future I had saved for, but perhaps, in its own way, a future worth building nonetheless. 1 year after moving into the apartment with Aaron, I found a letter slipped under my bedroom door. This was unusual. Our communications typically happened face-to-face during accountability meetings or through practical notes about groceries and schedules. I unfolded the single page to find Aaron's neat handwriting covering both sides. "Mom, a year ago today, we signed the lease on this apartment. Neither of us mentioned the anniversary yesterday, but I've been thinking about it constantly. A year of living together not as mother and gambling addict son, but as two adults trying to rebuild something broken." During yesterday's therapy session, Dr. Morales asked me a question that's been echoing in my mind. "What have you learned this year that surprised you?" I realized my answer might matter to you too. I've learned that rebuilding trust isn't a single decision, but thousands of small choices made daily. It's showing up consistently. It's telling the truth even when it's uncomfortable. It's honoring commitments when no one is watching. I've learned that addiction doesn't just disappear with sobriety. It lurks beneath the surface, changing shape, but always present. Some days the urge to gamble is an angry shout. Other days it's a quiet whisper. But acknowledging it rather than hiding from it takes away its power. Most surprisingly, I've learned that who we become after devastation can be more authentic than who we were before. The son you raised was partly a fiction, a person performing the role he thought would please everyone while hiding his darker impulses. The son writing this letter is deeply flawed, but finally honest about those flaws. I don't know what the next year holds. My program finishes in 6 months. Your retirement planning continues to take shape. Our paths may diverge again as they should. But I wanted to mark this milestone by saying simply, thank you for the hardest gift you've ever given me, accountability. Aaron and I sat on the edge of my bed, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. In those paragraphs, I recognized a maturity that had been emerging gradually over the months, a depth of self-reflection that the pre-addiction Aaron had never demonstrated. The apartment's silence was broken by the sound of the front door opening and closing, Aaron returning from his evening graphic design class. I tucked the letter into my bedside drawer, considering whether to acknowledge it directly or let it exist as the private communication he had intended. Over breakfast the next morning, I made my decision. "I got your letter," I said, watching. His expression shift from surprise to nervous anticipation. "Thank you for writing it." Aaron nodded, his eyes trained on his coffee mug. "I meant every word." "I know you did," I replied. "And you're right. This year has been about rebuilding, but not just trust between us. I've been rebuilding myself too." He looked up, waiting for me to continue. "Before all this happened, I defined myself almost entirely as your mother, the sacrificing, ever-supportive parent. When you betrayed that role by stealing from me, I lost more than money. I lost my identity." The words emerged with a clarity that surprised me. Insights crystallized through months of therapy and painful self-examination. This year has forced me to rediscover who I am beyond motherhood. Beyond martyrdom, honestly. I gave a small, self-deprecating smile. "Turns out there's more to me than I remembered." Aaron's expression softened. "I've noticed. You've changed." "We both have," I acknowledged. Maybe that's the one positive outcome from all of this. The conversation marked a subtle but significant shift in our interactions, a move from careful politeness and practical arrangements toward more authentic connection. Not forgiveness exactly, but something adjacent to it. A recognition that both of us were evolving through the crucible of our shared experience. Spring brought new developments. Aaron completed his certification program with distinction, building a portfolio strong enough to attract several freelance design clients. His therapist suggested transitioning from individual sessions to group therapy focused specifically on maintaining long-term recovery, a step that reflected his progress. Meanwhile, I met with an attorney to finalize my updated will and retirement plan, decisions I had postponed for months. With the restitution money wisely invested and Aaron's regular payments continuing, early retirement at 65, rather than the 67 or 68 I had grimly accepted, seemed increasingly feasible. "You should consider downsizing options now," my financial advisor suggested during a quarterly review. "The current real estate market favors sellers, and getting established in a retirement-friendly community before you stop working can ease the transition." Her recommendation sparked a conversation I had been avoiding. If I planned to move within the next few years, what did that mean for our living arrangement? Aaron's financial situation had stabilized, but remained precarious as he built his design business. The apartment had served its purpose as a transitional space, but neither of us had intended it as a permanent solution. I raised the subject during our weekly accountability meeting, now more a check-in than the formal financial review it had once been. "I've been thinking about next steps," I began. "My advisor suggests I should consider retirement housing options soon, even before I stop working." Aaron nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. What are you considering?" "There's a small development about an hour south, warmer climate, lower cost of living, designed for active seniors." I hesitated before adding, "I'd need to sell my half of the lease here, obviously." "Obviously," he echoed, his expression carefully neutral. "When would this happen?" "Not immediately. 6 months, maybe a year." I studied his face, trying to gauge his reaction. "Would that be enough time for you to make arrangements?" Aaron ran a hand through his hair, a gesture familiar from his childhood when confronting uncomfortable truths. "Honestly, I've been thinking about changes too. A couple of my regular clients have suggested I consider relocating to Chicago where they're based. The design market there is stronger, and with remote work, I could serve clients anywhere." The revelation caught me off guard. "Chicago? You never mentioned considering a move." "It's been on my mind since completing the certification," he admitted. "But I wasn't sure how to bring it up given our arrangement. I didn't want you to think I was abandoning our agreement." The irony wasn't lost on either of us, both quietly planning next steps, both hesitant to disrupt the careful equilibrium we'd established. Our arrangement was always meant to be temporary, I reminded him. A transitional phase for both of us. I know, but after everything, I didn't want you to think I was running away from my obligations. I considered his concern. Your financial obligations aren't tied to living here. You've been consistent with payments, and I trust that would continue regardless of location. The words emerged naturally, but their significance registered immediately in Aaron's expression. Trust. A concept so thoroughly shattered a year and a half ago that its cautious reemergence felt monumental. I would never miss a payment, he said firmly. Geography wouldn't change that commitment. As spring turned to summer, our future plans took more definite shape. I put a deposit on a small villa in the retirement community, with occupancy scheduled for the following spring. Aaron secured several Chicago-based clients and began researching neighborhoods there, eventually signing a lease on a studio apartment near the city's design district. Our lease renewal came due in September, coinciding with the 18th month of our cohabitation. By mutual agreement, we extended for 6 more months, enough time for Aaron to complete his relocation plans and for me to prepare my villa, but not so long that we remained in a holding pattern. These practical decisions unfolded against the backdrop of deeper emotional evolution. The ground between us, once dominated by caution and careful boundaries, gradually yielded to something more genuine. Not the naive trust of before, but a clear-eyed acceptance of both capabilities and limitations. In October, I faced a significant milestone: the complete settlement of Aaron's debt to one of the 3 original collection agencies. The final payment, delivered electronically like all those before it, represented the first major debt fully resolved. During our next accountability meeting, I presented Aaron with the official letter confirming the account's closure. 1 down, he said, echoing words spoken on the courthouse steps a year earlier. 2 to go. There was pride in his voice, justified satisfaction in a commitment honored despite difficulty. The remaining debts were substantial, with years of payments still ahead, but this first resolution represented tangible progress. I've been thinking, I said carefully. With us both moving soon, it might make sense to formalize the remaining financial arrangements, a legally binding agreement rather than our current understanding. Aaron didn't bristle at the suggestion as he might have earlier. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Something that outlines the payment, schedule for the remaining collection agency, and for my personal debt to you. Exactly. Not because I don't trust your intentions, I clarified, but because life happens. If something happened to either of us, having everything documented would be important. We engaged a mediator who specialized in financial agreements between family members, creating a document that balanced accountability with realistic expectations. The terms acknowledged potential changes in Aaron's income while maintaining his fundamental responsibility. My name would remain on his financial accounts for monitoring purposes, but with clear limitations that respected his growing independence. As we signed the final agreement in the mediator's office, I felt a curious sense of completion. The document represented the transformation of something deeply personal, a son's betrayal of his mother's trust, into something structured and manageable, a financial obligation with defined parameters. This feels like a turning point, Aaron observed as we left the office. It does, I agreed, though I'm not entirely sure what it's turning toward. He considered this as we walked to the parking lot. Maybe toward a future where what happened isn't the only defining element of our relationship, where it's part of our history but not the whole story. His insight resonated with something I'd been feeling but hadn't articulated. For 18 months, our interactions had been shaped primarily by the theft and its aftermath, by accountability structures and recovery protocols and restitution efforts. Necessary, certainly, but fundamentally reactive, defined by what had been broken rather than what might yet be built. "I'd like that," I said simply. The holidays approached, bringing the question of how to navigate family traditions in our new reality. Richard, Aaron's father, had remained peripherally involved throughout the recovery process, attending support meetings and occasionally meeting Aaron for coffee. He called me directly in November, our first real conversation in years. "Aaron tells me you're both planning moves in the spring," he said after awkward pleasantries. "Eva and I were wondering if you'd both join us for Christmas dinner. Neutral territory, just a meal together." Eva, Richard's second wife, the woman he had left me for 20 years earlier. The invitation was unprecedented and uncomfortable. "I'll think about it," I said noncommittally. "Linda," Richard said before I could end the call, "I know this is strange, but Aaron's journey has affected all of us, made us reconsider things we thought were settled." After hanging up, I sat with the complex emotions the invitation had surfaced. Old resentments toward Richard, lingering discomfort with Eva, uncertainty about whether a holiday gathering would help or hinder the delicate reconstruction Aaron and I had been undertaking. I raised it with Aaron that evening as we prepared dinner, our kitchen choreography now smooth after months of shared meals. "Dad invited us both to Christmas dinner," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "You, me, him, Eva." Aaron's hand stilled over the vegetables he was chopping. "That's unexpected. What did you tell him?" "That I'd think about it." I glanced at him. "Have you ever spent holidays with all of us together? Since the divorce?" "No," he admitted. "It was always separate celebrations, even after I was an adult." The reality of what Richard was proposing, a gathering that acknowledged the complex interconnections of our fractured family, was both meaningful and fraught. "What do you think?" I asked. "Would it be helpful or harmful to your recovery process?" Aaron considered the question with the thoughtfulness that had become characteristic of him in recovery. "Honestly, I think it could be important. Not comfortable, but significant. All the key relationships in my life in one room, acknowledging both the damage done and the healing happening." His framing shifted my perspective. This wasn't just about old family dynamics. It was about Aaron's recovery journey, a journey that involved all of us in different ways. "Then I'll go," I decided. "Not for Richard or Eva, but for you. For this process we're all part of." Christmas dinner was as awkward as expected, but also strangely cathartic. Richard and Eva had created a neutral, welcoming space in their home. Conversation remained mostly on safe topics: Aaron's design business, my retirement plans, current events, with only occasional acknowledgments of the circumstances that had brought us together. Yet beneath the surface, politeness ran a current of shared understanding. We had all been marked by Aaron's addiction and its aftermath. We had all, in different ways, contributed to both the problems and the solutions. As we prepared to leave, Richard pulled me aside, while Aaron and Eva discussed a design project she was considering for her classroom. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I know it wasn't easy." "It wasn't," I agreed. "But it was necessary." He nodded, understanding the distinction. "Linda, I've never properly apologized for my part in all of this. Walking out on you and Aaron, it affected him deeply, created wounds that may have contributed to his later choices. The acknowledgement, after so many years of silence on the subject, was unexpected. We all made mistakes," I said finally. "You, me, Aaron. The question now is whether we learn from them." As we drove home through streets decorated with holiday lights, Aaron broke the comfortable silence. "Thank you for tonight. I know how difficult it must have been." "Parts of it were," I admitted. "But it felt important somehow, like closing a circle." He nodded. "That's exactly it. For years, the divorce created this fragmentation. like my life was divided into separate compartments that couldn't acknowledge each other. Tonight felt like integration. The insight struck me as profound, not just for Aaron, but for all of us. We had all been living with fragmentation, separating our experiences into before and after, acceptable and unacceptable, acknowledged and denied. Recovery, it seemed, wasn't just about Aaron overcoming gambling addiction. It was about all of us integrating the full, complex reality of our shared history. As winter deepened, our preparations for spring transitions accelerated. I donated furniture and household items accumulated over decades, keeping only what would fit comfortably in my smaller villa. Aaron built his Chicago client base, arranging a staggered relocation that would minimize disruption to existing projects. On the anniversary of the day, I had discovered the theft. 2 full years since that devastating moment at my kitchen table, we took an unplanned walk through a local park, snow crunching beneath our boots, breath visible in the crisp air. 2 years, Aaron said, naming the milestone neither of us had explicitly acknowledged. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, other times like another lifetime. Both are true, I think, I replied. The pain doesn't disappear, but it changes form, becomes part of the landscape rather than the entire view. He nodded, hands deep in his pockets against the cold. I was thinking this morning about what I would tell myself if I could go back to before it all happened, before the gambling took over. What warning would actually have made a difference? And? I'm not sure any warning would have worked, he said honestly. Addiction doesn't respond to logical arguments, but I wish I could have understood sooner that the real problem wasn't money or gambling or even lying. It was my inability to face reality on reality's terms, to accept limitations and disappointments without escaping into fantasy. The insight reflected how profoundly he had changed. No longer the impulsive young man running from consequences, but someone capable of clear-eyed self-assessment. What about you? He asked. What would you tell yourself? I considered the question carefully. I'd tell myself that sacrifice without boundaries isn't love. It's codependence. That I wasn't helping you by always being the safety net. That sometimes the most loving thing to do for someone is to let them experience the full impact of their choices. We continued walking, the conversation shifting to practical matters about our upcoming moves, the logistics of maintaining our financial agreement across distance, plans for periodic in-person check-ins to complement digital communication. As we circled back toward the apartment, Aaron paused, turning to face me directly. I know I've said this before, but it bears repeating. I'm sorry, Mom. Not just for the money, but for betraying your trust, for making you question a lifetime of choices, for turning your love into a weapon against you. His words, simple, direct, unqualified by excuses, hung in the cold air between us. I know, I said softly, and I believe you. It wasn't complete forgiveness. Perhaps that would never be possible given the magnitude of what had happened. But it was acceptance. Recognition that genuine remorse existed alongside the harm done, that growth had emerged from devastation, that our relationship had evolved into something different, but not entirely broken. The final weeks before our separate moves passed with surprising swiftness. Aaron departed first, heading to Chicago to settle into his apartment before his largest client project began. The goodbye was emotional but not devastating. We had established clear plans for ongoing communication, both about financial obligations and our evolving relationship. As I prepared for my own relocation the following month, packing the last items in our now half-empty apartment, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 2 years. From the shocking discovery of theft to orchestrating Aaron's confrontation with debt collectors. From rage and vengeance to the slow, painstaking reconstruction of trust. From financial devastation to partial recovery and realistic planning. None of it had unfolded as I would have chosen. The retirement I had meticulously saved for was irrevocably altered, delayed, diminished, reshaped by circumstances I had never anticipated. The relationship with my son was permanently transformed, the naive trust of before replaced by a more cautious, clear-eyed connection built on hard-earned honesty. Yet as I placed the last box into my car, I recognized that my orchestration of Aaron's confrontation with the debt collectors, an act born of pain and betrayal, had ultimately set in motion not just consequences, but also possibilities. Not just punishment, but also redemption. Not just endings, but also beginnings. The future stretching before me was not the one I had planned throughout those decades of careful saving. But it was a future with contours I had helped shape, with challenges I had proven capable of meeting, with relationships forged in fire rather than comfortable illusion. Not the future I deserved, perhaps, but one I could face with the hard won, wisdom that comes only through surviving what once seemed unsurvivable.